Because what I was going to say is her question kind of dovetails into Caitlin and Haley's, and I would love for Caitlin and Haley to unmute and share a little more if they're willing. But both of them are talking about, kids who have gotten really into this election. Caitlin has a 4-year-old, Haley's got a 7 and a 3. And Caitlin said it really well, I think, which is like, it feels that he's rooting for a sports team almost, but they're getting anxious about explaining the after effects and the emotions that go with that. And that it's going to, as people who are obviously politically engaged, or we wouldn't be on this call, explaining how we feel about that to ourselves first, and then to a kid is worrisome and concerning. And I think that goes to some of your answer to Marianne there, and a lot of what you were saying about controlling emotions and not lashing out. Absolutely, I understand after 35 years on this planet that is a better route. It's also really hard to control sometimes because, like you said, some of it is very personal right now. And it does feel to some people that you're squashing their existence as a human, not talking about a political thing that doesn't necessarily connect to them. So I'm sure that for these kids, there's an element of that. And Caitlin and Haley, if you want to jump on and add anything to the questions you added in the chat, that would be great. And we can turn it over to Marcie to answer it.
I can quickly say I'm driving, so I'm not going to chat for very long. So I wanted to raise that because that is weighing on my mind with my son. I think, when he was 3 at the last election, I was so happy that he wasn't awake or aware to experience what I was experiencing. And this time around, I just have this fear and concern that if that is, if there is a risk or chance that, there's some result that ends up with me in a very similar, not state, but, stress level or concern and emotional roller coaster that, could potentially go on for days. How do you discuss that? And particularly when you have a child, it sounds like Caitlin's is as well, that seems to be so, super fan, not because they know why they are, but because they're, I guess, maybe the context they're living in it. They are taking sides or picking teams. And then what if it, doesn't go that way? How do you work through that when you yourself, like Liz just said, can't necessarily work through it?
Right. So Caitlin, do you have to add to that, or do you want me to answer and then we'll jump in with you?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that, like a sports team, I can sort of say, there's another game, the Red Sox will be on tomorrow, that kind of thing. Yeah. But with this, it's such a bigger thing, and it's a 4-year thing, and it's, so many things are changing, and it's so volatile right now in just all of our lives that it's a lot for, like we were talking about, a lot for us to just process and then to explain to them and say, these are totally different views. This is not like the Red Sox versus the Yankees. These guys are good and these guys are bad. That's not, how it is. And so, yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a matter of degrees. They were pitching better today. Right. It is for sure. So, the place that I would start is just giving the recognition and the breath to you as parents in saying, we also are we're 7 months into a pandemic with you all having your kids home from school, and now this on top of it, right? With all of the other things that come with the election, with all of the social justice conversations that have been happening, with all of the everything that's been going on, giving yourself space and breath for this to be hard is okay. And saying to your kids, like, there's a lot riding on this, because I think that no matter what side of the political arena you're in, everyone feels like there's a lot riding on this, but also it's just been so long of so many emotions that this is also going to feel harder than it would if we weren't in the middle of all of these other layers. Mm-hmm. And so talking to your child about that, giving yourself space and breath and acknowledgement of that, of you've already been going through so much. And the next week is going to be that much more. So yeah, there are going to be big feelings. There are going to be big emotions. And my guess is that we're going to be in this roller coaster for, my guess is weeks. Like, I don't think.
Well, you're an election predictor, as we learned.
It almost feels to me, this is Haley, like we literally.
Oh no, Haley, we lost you.
Are experiencing another pandemic of uncertainty. Ambiguous issue on top of another ambiguous issue.
Yep, Absolutely. And so saying that to your kids and saying, so there are going to be a lot of really big emotions for me and for you, because this is layers on layers, right? And that might not be something that at 7 they can really get and understand, because quite frankly, I don't think we can really cognitively process this. But at least if you're saying it, you're giving yourself the space, you're preparing them in some ways for it. So I'm a big fan of also preparing for all options. So when I sit down to play a game with a kid who doesn't like to lose at games, I say to them, okay, what happens if you win the game? And they'll tell me that they'll do their happy dance and they'll be all excited. And I'll say, right, okay. And what happens if I win the game? And they get all like, oh, no, you're not going to win. And I'm like, but what if I do? What would happen? And then I'll tell you, good job. And I'm like, okay, great. Now we can play the game, because we know what's going to happen regardless of the outcome. I would start those conversations with your child. Yes, we all are hoping this is going to be the outcome. And yes, this is going to be great. What do you think we'll do if that's not the outcome? What if the other guy wins? What should we do then? And I would put in action steps, because the way to deal with overwhelm, with anxiety, with anger is action, right? When there is something we can do, right? When COVID happened, one of the biggest things I talked to parents was talk to your kids about what you're doing to keep them safe, right? We're washing our hands, we're staying home, we're wearing masks. This is going to be the same thing. If the other person wins, what are you going to do, right? Are we going to sit home and cry? Probably for a few days. But then what can we do to make sure that the principles, that the liberties, that the things that you feel are important in this country stay important? Are you going to write letters to your senator? Have your kids draw pictures for it? Are you going to make signs? Are you going to donate to a charity? Are you going to start volunteering for a charity that you believe in? What are the things that we can do that will help protect those pieces that we hold sacred to ourselves? And so, yes, it's going to be hard if the person that you want to win doesn't, but your kid knowing that that's a possibility and talking about it ahead of time, even with you saying like, I think this is going to be really bad, but we have to think about it. I really hope this doesn't happen, but we have to talk about it. Right? All of that language is okay, but that preparedness beforehand. Now, I know in one of the questions that I was reading, it's what happens with the potential fallout that is being discussed in our country, right? The protests, the more people in the streets, the potential violence, all of that is coming, that is potentially coming. Did I say that right? I hope so. And so part of that is, your kids don't need to know those pieces of the conversation unless they're hearing it on the news, unless they're hearing it from other places, in which case you have to own the truth of that. But your kids don't have to know about that possibility unless we are there. Because my hope and my wish and my prayer and all of the magic fairy dust I have in my pockets is that is not what happens in this country, that we find a way to come back together, to honor the results, to move forward as a country. And it is the one piece that I'm like, protect your kids. Don't share that unless we have to, because we don't want to scare our children, right? With that said, have a plan. What are you going to do? What do you want to do? Are you somebody who wants to go out and be part of the protests and demonstrations? And how will you do that with your family safely? Are you someone who's going to say, okay, actually, we're going to stay home for the next 2 weeks, and that feels safe to you? Are you going to go stay with friends and visit with them? In which case you can just talk to your child about the fact that here are some of the possibilities of what we might be doing after the election. And as the election comes through and as we're learning about the results, you will already have some preconceived idea of what you want to do in those situations so that you can help navigate that with your kids. But they're going to hear what's going on. So if any of those harder elements come through, any more of those division of our country comes through, knowing and thinking about the words that you will use and how will you explain that to your kids, right? Because it's not us versus them. It's not the enemy. It's not some horrible, evil monster on the other side. There are other Americans on the other side. So how do you, in your family with your beliefs, want to explain who those people are? Because at some point, we're all going to have to come together. And I don't know what that point is, but having that conversation with your children is going to be powerful and important, because you want them to feel safe and know that you are going to take care of them, even when you're not sure what exactly that looks like. And so conversations like, we are going to stay together as a family, no matter what happens. We're going to be able to talk about it no matter what happens, so that they know they can come to you with any question, with any fear, with any concern, and say, we'll figure it out as a family together.
Caitlin, does that fit with your 4-year-old? I'm curious because you said that he got more into the election than you had expected. Do you think that's just from conversation at home, or is he hearing it a lot, just in general outside?
I think it's home. I know my parents sent him a shirt that he loves wearing, and he will watch it with me. Part of it's probably just the television's on. He's willing to watch anything. But yeah, no, I love your suggestions on what do we do now? Like, are we going to write letters? Are we going to draw pictures? Are we going to talk about it? And I don't know what we're going to do now in the big picture, but
when I was listening to that, I was like, I need to come up with that plan too. What are we going to do?
And it's also the kind of thing where you can be like, okay, I'm going to say we're going to write letters, because then we can sit down. I'm going to tell my kids to draw a picture, and I'm going to write there and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I just bought myself 10 minutes, right? Because there are going to be those moments where you need some breath. You need space to digest and process what's happening. And so some of those things are going to help you get there.
Yeah. Also, Caitlin, is this just a phenomenal Halloween decoration behind you? That is amazing. I was looking at that and I was like, wow, well done. Well done. You got a lucky 4-year-old over there.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, right, Liz, is we have Halloween, we have daylight savings all leading up to this. And if you can get your kids to focus on that, if you can focus on that, right? I know that Halloween's very different this year, but if we can take some of the joy of that holiday, of the, what are we going to dress up as? And how are we going to make it feel special? And let's eat way too much candy on Saturday, so all of our kids are crazy on Sunday kind of space, it's a little bit of a release valve. And many of us need that. So take that break before we head into next week.
That's smart too. I think, it's not a baseball game that we're watching. We're not going to sit there and watch it together. So we're not watching, the news that night together, maybe after he goes to sleep. So I can tell him when I'm ready to tell him, which is helpful.
Yes, exactly. And being mindful of when the news is on in the background, how much the news is on in the background, not just for your kids, but also for yourself. Right. I know that the minute I start hearing some of the commentary, like 10 minutes of the news, and I'm like, okay, what's happening? Okay. And I turn it off and I'm like, oh, right. Okay. I can put it in the back of my head, get done what I need to get done. And sometimes as parents, that's the action that needs to happen of maybe Tuesday night, you plan a rockin' good Taco Tuesday night. And you're like, yeah, the election's happening. People are counting ballots. People are voting. We voted. Remember, this is how we did it, whether it was mail-in or drop-off or you went in person, whatever it is, and be like, okay, and tonight we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate that we made it to election day and move forward from there with your kids. And then Wednesday, whatever the information is to share, you're going to share it with them. Let it come from your voice as opposed to the newscasters, as opposed to what's going on there. If you have an older kid that has their own cell phone, they might wake up and be on their screen right away, looking at what's happening. And so be prepared for that. Be prepared for them to come down in the morning, wound up from whatever they read or heard, and know that that's going to be part of the conversation. But between now and then, monitor how much news is on in your house, if you can, if it's up to you.
That's actually a great point.